14-year-old girl vanishes from her home in rural Michigan. No evidence, no witnesses, just gone. Her adoptive father says she ran away, and for 30 years everyone believed him. But the truth? It was buried in his backyard the whole time. This is the haunting case of Aundria Bowman, where trust was broken, justice was delayed, and silence nearly won. But not today. If you're into real stories that deserve to be heard, hit subscribe right now, because here on CrimePulseStories, we don't just cover cases, we uncover the truth. It was just an ordinary school day until it wasn't. On the surface, 14-year-old Aundria Bowman was like any other freshman, quiet, artistic, observant. That morning, she left her home in a rural part of Allegan County to attend school as usual. But by the end of the day, she was gone. Her adoptive parents, Dennis and Brenda Bowman, reported that she had run away. No struggle, no forced entry, no missing belongings, just an absence. And their story, it never changed. According to police records, Brenda told authorities that Aundria had recently gotten into trouble, something about stolen money at school, and that she was upset. That's it. No Amber Alert, no media frenzy, just a few flyers, some local concern. And then silence. There were no sightings, no calls, no ransom. Just a girl who vanished and a father who seemed all too calm. And while officials logged it as a teen runaway case, those who knew Aundria personally, neighbors, classmates, even distant family, weren't so sure. She wasn't the type to just disappear without a word. And the Bowmans? Something about them didn't feel right. But in 1989, there were no TikToks or viral campaigns. Aundria's name didn't trend. Her case didn't escalate, and the official narrative stuck. She ran away. End of story. Or so they thought. Long before she was known as Aundria Bowman, she was born Alexis Miranda Badger in New Orleans, Louisiana. Her early life wasn't easy. Her biological mother faced struggles, including poverty and instability, and Alexis was eventually placed into the foster system. In 1984, at just 9 years old, she was adopted by Dennis and Brenda Bowman, a seemingly devout Christian couple from Michigan looking to expand their family. But with the adoption came a name change and a new identity. Alexis became Aundria. On paper, it looked like a fresh start. New parents, a new home, a new future. But for Aundria, it wasn't just a name. It was a loss of everything she had known. Her past was erased. And that past, in many ways, became a secret she wasn't allowed to talk about. Dennis Bowman, an ex-Navy veteran and self-proclaimed disciplinarian, ran the house like a boot camp. Aundria was expected to obey without question. Any resistance was labeled rebellion. In rare diary entries and later testimony, it would become clear that Aundria struggled with that control. She missed her birth roots. She questioned authority. She was bright, curious, and unwilling to just fall in line. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was a total rewrite of her story, one she never agreed to. And as the tension in the home escalated, Aundria began to see cracks in the facade, especially when it came to her adoptive father. But speaking out was risky. In 1989, adopted children had even fewer protections than they do today. And when abuse happened behind closed doors, especially in respectable families, it often stayed there. So Aundria smiled at school. She kept quiet. But inside, she was holding on to something big, something she wasn't supposed to tell anyone. On the outside, the Bowman family looked ordinary, even ideal. A modest house nestled in rural Michigan, church on Sundays, polite neighbors who minded their own business. But inside that house was a very different world. Dennis Bowman, the patriarch, was a Navy veteran with a reputation for being strict. But to those who really knew him or would later testify against him, he was something else entirely, a man obsessed with control. Religion wasn't just a belief system in the Bowman home, it was a tool. Andrea was raised under intense fundamentalist Christian values, where obedience wasn't optional and questions weren't tolerated. She was homeschooled part time, kept isolated from peers, and her daily life was dictated by rules that constantly shifted. Brenda Bowman, her adoptive mother, played the role of peacekeeper, but her silence often enabled the darker patterns unfolding inside the home. Aundria, bright and expressive, began to push back, asking questions, challenging restrictions, wanting to explore the world outside the four walls of that house. And Dennis, he didn't like that. Later reports and court documents would reveal what Aundria had confided in others. She felt unsafe, uncomfortable, controlled. And as the pressure inside the Bowman household built, it became clear something was going to give. The home wasn't just dysfunctional, it was dangerous, and Andrea knew it. The official timeline marks March 11th, 1989, as the day Andrea Bowman disappeared. But the truth is something much darker happened before anyone realized she was missing. According to Dennis Bowman's own later confession, Andrea had reached her breaking point. That day, the tension that had been simmering finally boiled over. She had discovered something, either a memory she could no longer bury or evidence of abuse she could no longer stay silent about. She reportedly confronted Dennis, threatening to tell someone, to speak up, to make it stop. And that moment, those words set everything into motion. Dennis would later claim the confrontation turned violent, that they fought, that he snapped. But there's no justification in what followed, only a decision that would forever mark him as a predator and a killer. Within hours, Andrea was gone, not just missing gone. And Dennis, he covered his tracks, told Brenda she had run away, called the authorities, acted concerned. He buried her secret along with her body. For years, that lie sat quietly under their lawn, a grim placeholder for the truth. And the world kept moving, unaware that justice was sitting just beneath the surface. After that day in March 1989, everything just stopped. Police took the report. Brenda Bowman claimed Andrea had run away. Dennis played along. And just like that, the search was shallow, quiet, and ultimately abandoned. No search warrants, no wide-scale investigation, no serious suspicion aimed at Dennis Bowman. Authorities treated Andrea as a rebellious teen who got tired of rules and took off, a cliche that law enforcement used far too often back then, especially with girls in foster care or adopted homes. As the months rolled into years, her case went cold. The file collected dust. The Bowmans moved to a new home, started over. Occasionally, Brenda would tell people Andrea had called from California, that she was fine, just didn't want to come home. There was never proof, never a phone record, just stories. And the media barely touched it. Andrea wasn't famous. She wasn't trending. No Dateline, no CNN coverage, not even local urgency. It was as if she had never existed. And Dennis Bowman, he got away with it for 30 years. While Andrea's biological family grieved in silence and advocates pushed for answers, Dennis lived freely, mowing the lawn, attending church, smiling for photos. Until one day, another case cracked everything wide open. Before Andrea, before the disappearance, before the backyard burial, Dennis Bowman already had a dark past. In 1980, nearly a full decade before Andrea went missing, Dennis was arrested for attempting to abduct and sexually assault a young woman. He had lured her into his car under false pretenses, driven her into the woods, and tried to attack her. She escaped. He was caught, and he pleaded guilty. But the consequences? Minimal. He avoided serious prison time, got probation, and walked right back into civilian life with no one watching. That conviction should have raised red flags. It should have made adopting a child nearly impossible. But somehow, Dennis and Brenda were able to bring Aundria into their home just a few years later. And that's not all. In later investigations, other incidents came to light. Neighbors remembered strange behavior. Former co-workers recalled unsettling conversations. Even Andrea's school had noted her fear and discomfort, especially around her father. But no one connected the dots. No one dug deeper. And Dennis knew how to play the role of a reformed man, quiet, unassuming, religious. Meanwhile, the truth sat buried beneath his property, and no one even thought to check. If his past had been taken seriously, maybe Andrea's future wouldn't have ended so soon. For 30 years, Dennis Bowman kept a secret. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, especially when they involve more than one victim. In 2019, police in Norfolk, Virginia reopened a nearly 40-year-old cold case, the 1980 murder of Kathleen Doyle, a young Navy wife found brutally murdered in her home. The crime had long gone unsolved, but advancements in forensic DNA technology gave investigators new hope. They ran the evidence through national databases and got a match. Dennis Bowman. The same man who had told the world that Aundria ran away. The same man with the old assault conviction. The same man who had lived quietly in Michigan, just out of reach of accountability. Now the spotlight was back on him. Detectives began retracing his life, and very quickly they uncovered something disturbing. A long-forgotten missing persons report from 1989. A teenage girl, his adopted daughter. The more they dug, the more inconsistencies they found. Old statements didn't line up. Paper trails had gaps, and no one could verify that Aundria Bowman had ever been seen alive after March 1989. So Michigan authorities reopened that case too. And this time, they weren't taking Dennis's word for it. They got a search warrant, brought in dogs. For the first time in 30 years, someone looked at the ground beneath his home. And that's when the truth started to surface literally. On November 22nd, 2019, Dennis Bowman cracked. Faced with mounting evidence, national attention, and pressure from multiple jurisdictions, he finally confessed. Not all at once and not with full remorse, but enough to end the mystery. Dennis admitted that back in 1989, Aundria hadn't run away. She had confronted him possibly about abuse, possibly about leaving, and in response, he killed her. His version of events was vague. He claimed they argued, that he pushed her, that it got out of hand. But the timeline didn't match, and the truth was likely worse than anything he admitted. He told police where to find her remains. Authorities searched the Bowman family property in Allegan County, and beneath a concrete slab right on his land, they made the devastating discovery: skeletal remains that would later be confirmed as Aundria's through DNA testing. She had been there the entire time, buried in the backyard. The same yard Dennis had mowed, where neighbors had barbecued, where life had gone on, while the truth was buried beneath their feet. Aundria wasn't a runaway. She was a victim hidden and silenced. But now, finally, she had a voice again. And Dennis Bowman's web of lies had collapsed. In 2021, more than 3 decades after Aundria Bowman was murdered and buried in secret, Dennis Bowman finally stood before a judge. His trial was swift by comparison because he confessed. There were no dramatic denials, no long list of alibis, just a broken man in handcuffs and a courtroom full of people still trying to understand how he'd gotten away with it for so long. Bowman pleaded no contest to second-degree murder in Aundria's case. The court sentenced him to 35 to 50 years in prison, essentially a life sentence given his age. And yet, for many, it didn't feel like closure. Aundria's biological family, especially her mother, Kathy Turkanian, spoke publicly about the heartbreak of losing a daughter not once, but twice, first to adoption and then to murder. She had spent years trying to find Aundria, only to learn that she'd been gone all along. She asked a question many couldn't answer. How was a man like Dennis Bowman ever allowed to adopt my child? And that question still echoes. Why didn't the system catch his 1980 conviction during the adoption process? Why did law enforcement take his runaway story at face value? Why did it take another murder in another state to finally bring him down? These aren't just questions for the courtroom, they're questions about the system itself. Because yes, Dennis Bowman is behind bars now, but it took 30 years. 3 decades of silence. 3 decades where Aundria could have been remembered, honored, found. Justice finally came, but way too late. And for many who loved her, it doesn't feel like justice at all. It feels like a system that looked the other way until it couldn't anymore. Aundria Bowman never got the chance to grow up. She never went to prom, never got her license, never lived past 14. But in the years since her remains were found and since Dennis Bowman's conviction, her story has taken on a second life. Advocacy groups for adopted children have cited her case as a tragic example of what happens when background checks are rushed or overlooked. Her biological mother, Kathy, continues to speak publicly about Aundria not just as a victim, but as a girl who loved art, who wanted to be free, who deserved so much more than silence. Online forums and justice podcasts have taken her story global, sparking conversations about adoptive abuse, missing persons biases, and how easily some children fall through the cracks of our system. And while Dennis Bowman is finally behind bars, there's a deeper truth here. Aundria's life was short, but it wasn't meaningless. Her voice was stolen, but her story still speaks. And by telling it, sharing it, and remembering her, we make sure that silence doesn't win, ever again. If this story moved you even just a little, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to support real storytelling that brings truth to light. Subscribe to CrimePulseStories so you don't miss the cases that deserve to be heard. And if you think someone you know should hear Aundria's story, share this video. Because justice only matters if we keep talking about it.